Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my Week 9 running back starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about news around the National Football League as it pertains to fantasy football, as the trade deadline is later this afternoon going to close. So many teams are trying to strike deals before that. So we'll talk about a couple deals that happened earlier today and could potentially happen later this afternoon. Then after that, we're going to be talking about matchups at the running back position going into Week 9, and then closing out with my top 36 running back rankings on the week. As you all know, if you haven't already seen an episode before, timestamps are down in the description for those of you interested in just finding specific players. Also, don't forget my Patreon link down in the description, and if you guys haven't yet already, click that subscribe button. Help us get to that 12,000 subscriber mark. Also, don't forget to click the bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. And if you like today's video, make sure you click the like button. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. We got a little bit of a Halloween theme here for this week, but should be good. All right. So, likewise, I mentioned we're going to be talking about a little bit of news that kind of took place this morning, and a couple things that we can now confirm that we were really questioning yesterday. A couple of the big things, like I mentioned yesterday, Darius Guice is going to be returning, but not this week. Chances are he is poised to return against the Jets in a couple weeks. So that's perfectly fine. So for those of you looking to pick up a guy that could potentially be a starter going forward, Darius Guice, another great option. Moving on, I did mention that Joe Flacco has a neck injury, and he will be missing this week. I think it said herniated disc, and he's going to get a second opinion. But Drew Lock, the quarterback that they drafted in the 2019 NFL draft, he is medically cleared, and he is going to come off waivers and potentially start this week going forward. This is a 2-6 football team, like Joe Flacco said in his post-game interview. And I don't think they really need to use Flacco anymore. They could probably move on to Drew Lock and see what they can get out of him. Moving on, in terms of trade deadline moves that could potentially be made. Trent Williams, the left tackle for the Washington Redskins, has not played a snap with the Redskins this season, because he wanted to be traded. He does not want to play for the organization anymore. The organization has said that we're not going to trade him unless we get a big piece. Nothing has really moved, but there is a potential, and the rumors have been kind of looming, that potentially the New England Patriots could go and try to make a deal for him, and or the Cleveland Browns, a team that is very desperate for offensive line help. If they can go ahead and lock down another stud player like Trent Williams, an all-pro left tackle for the last couple of years for the Washington Redskins, that would be some ridiculous moves going down. But only time will tell whether that deal gets done or otherwise. Trent Williams is going to continue to hold out for the rest of the season. Moving on, other deals. Potentially, like we mentioned, Robbie Anderson could be traded, but there is news coming out this morning that Le'Veon Bell could potentially be traded and that the Jets are potentially shopping him around. Now, where would I like to see him land? There's a couple places. Obviously, his contract is far too expensive for many teams, and unless a team is going to start cutting players, trading players away, and clearing up cap space, it is going to be extremely difficult for an organization to bring on Le'Veon Bell with his current contract. There is a reason why a lot of teams did not find interest in Le'Veon Bell. His age was one of the things, also injury history, off the field issues, and the fact that he wanted a lot of money, and a lot of teams aren't willing to spend a lot for a running back at this moment in time. So I'm not sure if a deal gets done. But again, the New York Jets did recently trade Leonard Williams, a guy that out of USC was a top pick in the first round a couple years back, has been a great defensive lineman for them. They went ahead and they traded him away for pretty much chump change, the 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick to the New York Giants, which is pretty ridiculous. So if they're trying to clear house, I could potentially see them really just trying to offload Le'Veon Bell on any other organization. I'd love to see him go to the Houston Texans or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's exactly where we wanted him to go in the offseason. Unfortunately, that wasn't a chance, but we'll see between whether the Jets are going to start dealing players soon. A couple other players. Andy Dalton, earlier today, the news was kind of, around Andy Dalton and the Bengals organization. They're an 0-8 team. They're going into the bye week. They're not looking to probably make any sort of playoff run. And Andy Dalton will be benched after this week. So going into Week 10, Andy Dalton will no longer be the starting quarterback of this team. and it's going to hurt a lot of the pieces in this offense, I believe. I know that when Jeff Driscoll came into this team, when Andy Dalton went down with an injury last season, Jeff Driscoll wasn't a bad starting quarterback. So we could find some value with the new quarterback they're going to put in the coming weeks, but it does hurt everybody. Also, other news from that organization. Could they potentially be looking to trade A.J. Green today? Could they potentially be looking to trade Tyler Eifert, a guy that the Patriots have kind of looked at and thought, this is a guy that we could pick up, potentially put into our lineup and have him be the new Gronk because we need help at the tight end position because Ben Watson, Matt LaCosse, Izzo, they're not getting it done. So as of right now, those are a couple names that have been thrown around as of late. Let's look. What is this new notification that have been thrown? Big move on deadline day. Trent Williams, holdout over, he will be, reported back to the Redskins. So according to what I'm seeing here, even though I thought Trent Williams could potentially be traded, he's reported back to the Redskins. Maybe he's reported back just so he can get traded, but only time will tell. But either way, those are the news tidbits that I wanted to go over and make sure everybody's on the same page with in terms of fantasy football. So now that we've done that, we could talk about our Week 9 running backs and the rankings and etc. And let's talk about matchups, shall we? Let's go and do that right now. Let's talk about our matchups here. As you guys are familiar, on the left of me, on the left to me, I don't even know anymore. On the left, we have how many points defenses give up to opposing running backs on a weekly basis in half-point PPR scoring formats. Last week, I was super happy because somebody else outside of the Miami Dolphins were number one. It was the Cincinnati Bengals, and Todd Gurley didn't really do much. And James Conner had a monster game last night, by no surprise. And the Miami Dolphins are back on the top of the list as the worst defense against opposing running backs. For a good, 8 minutes? We thought the Miami Dolphins were trying to win a game there. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, not so much. And that went to just complete garbage. But either way, let's talk about some matchups. Obviously, you want to play guys that are playing against the Miami Dolphins. Who has the pleasure of doing that this week? Le'Veon Bell. Unfortunately, Le'Veon Bell has not done anything in the last 2 weeks. The trade rumors and all that kind of jazz kind of worries me because prior to the season beginning, Adam Gase, the head coach of this team, didn't even want to sign Le'Veon Bell. But he was signed before Adam Gase even got the job. Once Adam Gase came in, he made sure that the GM who signed Le'Veon Bell got fired, all this kind of jazz. So we'll see. But I think Le'Veon Bell, if he's going to be a Jet for the rest of the 2019 season at least, he should have a good week here, and they should be able to heavily run the ball against the Miami Dolphins and find some success there. The Bengals are on a bye week. The Detroit Lions haven't been able to stop Sol defensively for quite some time now. Saquon had a good week this past week. The week before that, Dalvin Cook able to torch them. Josh Jacobs gets his hands on this defense this coming week. Should be pretty easy for him. The Kansas City Chiefs, whether it's on the ground or through the air, again, Jamaal Williams and Aaron Jones both had monster games against this defense. Not really much of a surprise, but that pass that Aaron Rodgers made in the back of the end zone, I know a lot of people are talking about, hey, Deshaun Watson was able to evade the tackle, get kicked in the eye, and still complete a pass. I'm sorry, but I think that Aaron Rodgers' throw was far more impressive, in my opinion. As he's off balance, flying back, throwing it to the back of just perfect placement. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but either way. Kansas City gets to take on Dalvin Cook. I wonder how much fun he's going to have against that defense. The Carolina Panthers, goodness gracious, Tevin Coleman put up quick number on them. And Derrick Henry gets his hands on this defense this week. The Washington Redskins get to play against Frank Gore and Devin Singletary. They should be fine. The Green Bay Packers going to have a little bit of trouble, but I don't think it'll be that big of a deal considering the Los Angeles Chargers have not been able to really produce much of a run game at all. In terms of rushing yards per game, they're barely, I think they're even under 50 yards per game average in the last couple weeks here. So really just not going to be producing much. Hopefully Ekeler gets involved in the passing game. Then we get the Jets playing against Mark Walton. The Cleveland Browns taking on the Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay backfield without Joe Flacco, whether Drew Lock can end up moving this offense. That's the biggest question at this moment in time. And then we have the Los Angeles Chargers playing against Aaron Jones, Jamaal Williams. That's not going to be fun for them. And then, etc. Buffalo Bills, blah, blah, blah. Tougher matchups. Let's go check these out. Tennessee Titans playing against Christian McCaffrey. Doesn't matter who you put against Christian McCaffrey. We'll talk about it in a bit, but he's unstoppable. Then we have the Ravens, the Colts, the Steelers, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Buccaneers, the Saints, the 49ers, and the Patriots. A couple of these teams that I kind of want to mention. The Buccaneers this past week gave up the most yards that they have all season long, 75 to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry did not have a great game. He did fumble, and it wasn't good overall. But at least Derrick Henry on 16 carries was able to get 75 yards, catch a ball for 8. Is this going to be similar to what Chris Carson will probably end up producing? There's a possibility of that. This has been a good front seven all season long, and they have not been slowing down in terms of that. So that's always a difficult task for this for any opposing running back against that Tampa Bay front seven. The New England Patriots get to take on Ingram and or Lamar Jackson. They're going to be clamping down on the run there. The 49ers playing tough against any running back. Kenyan Drake, sure, you might be the starting running back at the Cardinals this week, but I don't really want to touch you considering this offense is just inept in general and they're not really used. I mean, without David Johnson out there, they don't look the same, plain and simple. And then we have a couple other matchups, but we'll talk about them in a little bit to more extent. Here we go. Let's talk about my top 36 running back rankings for the 2019 fantasy football season. Starting off with my number 1, Dalvin Cook. All right, so here's the thing about Dalvin Cook. Like I mentioned, gets to play against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs have really been struggling as of late against opposing running backs, and that's not a big surprise. Just this past week, they gave up 4 touchdowns to just running backs on the Green Bay Packers roster. So all in all, that group of guys, I mean, Jamaal Williams and Aaron Jones, a talented duo, but so is Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook. I think both of them are going to be able to succeed against the matchup, and I think the usage in which Dalvin Cook consistently gets his production, leading the league in rushing thus far this season, if I'm not mistaken, how many yards is he leading with? 823 on 156 carries. Pretty good so far, but all in all, I think Dalvin Cook, a great play, should be, and should be good to go. He's my number 1. Moving on to number 2, Ezekiel Elliott, coming off the bye week, getting to play against the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants they made an addition. They got Leonard Williams. Sure, that's going to help in the long run, but as of right now, you still have one of the best offensive lines, one of the best offenses in the National Football League, going to play against the Giants defense that is not good and won't be able to stop this offense. Last time we saw these two teams face was in week 1, and Dak Prescott threw for 4 touchdowns and completely lit up this defense without having to use Zeke. Once you start getting Zeke more involved, which now that we've gotten through the halfway point in the season, we are going to see more usage of Ezekiel Elliott going forward, and I think he's going to get back to having his 20-plus point games every single week in a half-point PPR scoring format, especially considering he's going to get more and more involved in the passing game as we progress throughout the season, so it should be good to go. I like him as my number 2 on the week against the Giants defense. Moving on to number 3, Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, even with Kyle Allen heavily struggling and the game being so out of their control. Kyle Allen, not only did he throw his first pick, but threw 3 picks in one game and was getting sacked, getting pressured. Christian McCaffrey managed to still come out with a 100-yard rushing game and a rushing touchdown. He is matchup proof, plain and simple. He could be the number 1 every single week, and no one would ever question it. As of right now, I think playing against the Tennessee Titans, perfectly fine, but I do think that the upside of a Cook, Elliott, should be a little bit higher, but I love Christian McCaffrey all the same. He's my number 3 on the week. Moving on to number 4, Saquon Barkley, the guy that, if he didn't have that injury, would probably be in that top 3 conversation at this moment. But here's the deal. This offense, they're continuing to improve. As Daniel Jones continues to target Saquon Barkley out of the backfield, it's beginning to at least give Barkley a little bit more value. I mean, sure, he's going to touch the ball, 16, 17 plus times a game. He's going to get his receptions. He's going to get some goal line work. But the fact that he's getting more and more involved in terms of targets, this is going back to what we saw last year. Last year, Saquon Barkley caught the ball 90 plus times. That's exactly how he gained so much value and why he was so valuable in fantasy football down the stretch. His usage in the passing game, especially when the run game started to stall out, was very important, vital to his overall production. I think going forward, if Daniel Jones can continue to just look for Saquon Barkley, dump it off, let him make plays. I don't know if you guys have seen that play from the Lions game where he literally jukes 2 people, buries one guy with a stiff arm, and then continues for a first down. The guy is unstoppable. It's unbelievable, but my number 4 it is for this week, playing against the Cowboys. Moving on to number 5, the thumbnail, Aaron Jones. I mean, Aaron Jones is a monster. We know that for certain. It's not even a doubt in anybody's mind. And who does Aaron Jones get to play this week? Well, they get to play against the Los Angeles Chargers defense. And let's just look at what exactly the Los Angeles Chargers defense has been giving up in the last couple weeks. All right, going back to week 5, Philip Lindsay had 114 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, while Royce Freeman himself had 61 rushing yards on only 13 carries. Pretty good. Both of them combined, over 170 rushing yards, perfectly fine. Then the week after that, in week 6, the combination of Benny Snell and James Conner, over 115 rushing yards total. There you go. There's another duo that's running for over 100 plus, right? And then the week after that, Derrick Henry, 90 rushing yards and a touchdown. This past week, 27 carries, 135 yards and a touchdown from David Montgomery, the guy that hadn't done anything all season long. Tarik Cohen got a little bit, involved in the passing game, but all in all, as of the last 4 weeks, this Charger defense cannot stop a soul on the ground, and they are really struggling. And when you get these 7-1 Green Bay Packers that come into town, it's going to be difficult, and I think Aaron Jones is on fire, whether it's on the ground, in the passing game, whether Jamaal Williams is out there or not. He continues to have incredible performances, a guy that has already surpassed 10-plus touchdowns halfway through the year. He's slated to have a pretty good rest of the season, so as of right now, I'm pretty confident in the play. I love Aaron Jones at 5 right now. Moving on to number 6, we have Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb gets to play against a defense that, as of right now, has been good. But the question will be, if in fact the offense for the Denver Broncos begins to stall out, what are we going to see out of Nick Chubb? Let's not forget, Nick Chubb had a very good game against the New England Patriots. Sure, he turned over the ball twice in vital times early in the game that really got the game out of hand for them and kind of lost the momentum. But all in all, Nick Chubb was on his way to having a huge performance. Yes, he fumbled it on a 40-yard run. On that drive, Nick Chubb's probably scoring. So there's a 10-point swing in his points alone, not to mention the fact that this guy finished with so many rushing yards against the best defense, and a defense that is the best against running backs in the National Football League. Nick Chubb is still able to produce behind an offensive line that has not been fantastic this year. I mean, still, how many? 130 rushing yards on 20 carries. That's exactly what we want to see going forward. Hopefully we can get more of it. Obviously, the fumbles early didn't help him. -4 instead of a +10. The guy could have had a 20-point week. I'm still on the Nick Chubb train. He's my number 6 on the week, playing against the Denver Broncos. Moving on, Le'Veon Bell is my number 7, playing against the Miami Dolphins. If in fact he's not getting traded, he's up here. If he gets traded to the teams like the Rams, let's say for example the Rams are crazy enough to where they're like, you know what, Todd Gurley's done. We're gonna go get Le'Veon Bell and try to make a run at this. So be it, right? He still stays up here. Obviously, he doesn't play this week, but Le'Veon Bell has a lot of value. He is a talented running back. He just needs to be given the opportunity. Running the ball 9 times in a game is not good enough. He only ran the ball 9 times against the Jaguars this past week. That's not good at all. We need to see him get more work, more utilization, and he will get more more production in his direction. And to be honest, I think this is the week they do it against Miami. Moving on, Derrick Henry at number 8. Coming off an okay week. Obviously, he's kind of been like, he's been slumping as of late. I don't know exactly. I mean, obviously, the main reason he's been slumping is because he hasn't found the end zone. That's a big deal for Derrick Henry. He needs the 6 points from the end zone. And when he does not find that and he is turning over the ball, which, very seldom does that happen, but still, that is going to hurt fantasy owners this coming week against the Carolina Panthers. Seeing as what they were capable, or at least what the 49ers are capable of doing against the Panthers last week, I mean, there is no way in hell that Derrick Henry isn't going to be having a big game against them. They have a good offensive line. Obviously, as long as Ryan Tannehill can not turn over the ball, stay consistent as he has been the last couple weeks, we're going to see Derrick Henry have a pretty decent week here. Hopefully, we can get him back into the end zone, 15 plus. That's what I expect. He's my number 8 on the week. Moving on to number 9, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette, as good as they get. I mean, the guy is, number 2 in terms of rushing yards thus far this season. He's trying to catch Dalvin Cook. He very much, so could possibly do so, but, the schedule coming up for them, not bad either. Either way, he gets the Houston Texans in London before they have a bye week. As of right now, Leonard Fournette continuing to see a lot of usage on the ground. In the last couple of weeks, 29 carries, 23 carries, 20 carries, 29 carries, 19 carries. His usage has gone up significantly from the first couple weeks. The first couple weeks, even when they played against the Houston Texans, he had 15 carries for 47 yards on the ground, still somehow surpassed the 10-point fantasy mark. When it comes to this week, I think they're going to use him heavily, and he's going to find success. He's going to have another good week. He is my number 9 running back on the week, Leonard Fournette. Moving on to number 10, Josh Jacobs. Like I was mentioning earlier, Josh Jacobs gets his hands on the Detroit Lions defense that cannot stop a soul. And I think Josh Jacobs has looked good, even with all the injury worry. Like I mentioned on Sunday during the live stream, if you don't have somebody, significantly better or even close to him, you got to play guys like this, especially when they say, I'm going to play even if my leg is, hanging off, or my finger is broken in the opposite direction, I'm still playing. I'm going to need a very significant injury for me to not play on a given week. And I respect that from Josh Jacobs. This offense has looked good. And going into this matchup, there's a very good opportunity that the Raiders win this game. And I think Josh Jacobs is going to be the way in which they do that, running the ball heavily and dictating the game that way. Moving on to number 11, Chris Carson. All right, here's my concern about Chris Carson. I kind of hinted at it a little bit with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in terms of allowing rushing yards to opposing running backs this season, been very good. They're the 29th ranked team in terms of giving up points to the opposing running back position. Who's had the best week against them? Obviously, it was Christian McCaffrey and Todd Gurley a couple weeks back. But in those games, Todd Gurley had a 22.5-point game against the Tampa Bay defense with only 5 carries for 16 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Did he do anything on the ground? Absolutely not. Christian McCaffrey in week 6, who had a 19.7-point game in London against them, 22 carries on the ground for 31 yards. No one can run the ball on this team. The fact that Rashad Penny is getting more usage also is a little bit concerning. Now, obviously, they were playing the Atlanta Falcons. They knew they were going to win. Why use Chris Carson so much and get him potentially injured? Let's use Rashad Penny. Let's get him back into the rhythm so that going forward, at least we have him ready. That being said, Chris Carson is one of the top 12 backs in the National Football League. He's a guy that no matter what, I really want to start because he is so talented and he gets the opportunity that he does on a weekly basis. 20 plus touches is something that you can't really find anywhere else. And he's going to continue to play in my lineup because of it, despite the matchup. So hopefully this offense can find something going, or otherwise Chris Carson could potentially struggle. But either way, he's my number 11. Moving on to number 12, James Conner. James Conner had a pretty big week against the Miami Dolphins. He gets to take on the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the issue that I have is that he sprained his AC joint late in the fourth quarter. Now, what exactly does that mean? There is a potential that he could just be fine, takes a couple days off, doesn't practice, good to go. Or he could potentially miss a significant amount of time in which Jaylen Samuels, who is ready and should be back this week, according to Mike Tomlin, could be taking the snaps from James Conner this week if, in fact, he's out. So we have to monitor that. If he is playing, he's a top 12 back. I surely want him at number 12. But there is a potential that he could see a limited workload if, in fact, they're trying to protect the shoulder, AC joint, just to make sure that there's no more significant damage to it. They might hold him back a little bit. So just take that into account. Let's move on to my running back twos on the week with my number 13 through 24. Talking about number 13, Tevin Coleman. All right. Tevin Coleman gets to play against the Cardinals this coming Thursday night. And I don't think this is going to be a difficult matchup whatsoever. I think Tevin Coleman, this offense, they are running the ball like an elite group, and they're unstoppable. And going forward, especially coming off of last week's performance, I think they're going to run the ball heavily on the Arizona Cardinals. What we saw Latavius Murray do, especially in the passing game, 12 targets, 9 receptions, get a receiving touchdown, looking like an elusive back. When you get Tevin Coleman out there with the running lanes that this offense is producing, he's unbelievable. And his production is going to continue to be as much as it was. Obviously, he's not having another 4-touchdown game, but at least he's going to be a good, solid RB2 going into this week with the potential upside of jumping into that RB1 conversation once again. Moving on to number 14, Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack gets to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, as of late, has been pretty good against the run. But if, in fact, we do see the absence of a James Conner in this offense, it could be a one-sided affair in which it is a lower scoring matchup because sometimes the Indianapolis Colts just don't know how to play offense. They forget some weeks, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Some teams just forget. But if you want to be an elite team in the National Football League and you want to be the number 1 team in your division, you got to be able to run the ball. especially against the Texans, against the Jaguars, against the Titans, because if you can't, dictate the game with your offense and kill time and chew clock, there's offenses in this division that are going to be able to score consistently. So as of right now, Marlon Mack hopefully can get back to running the ball. He had a pretty good game this past week, but I want to see more usage, and I want to see a little bit more oomph from him. So as of right now, sits at 14, but it should be a pretty good game. Moving on to number 15, Jordan Howard. All right, Jordan Howard's coming off a pretty good game. Even with Miles Sanders producing so much, I still have a lot of confidence in Jordan Howard's ability this week against the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, unfortunately, have forgotten how good they were at defense last season. And in the last couple weeks, Josh Jacobs had over 120 rushing yards. Latavius Murray had 119 rushing yards. And just this past week, sure, Melvin Gordon, Austin Ekeler, they can't do anything because their offense sucks. But I know for a fact, Jordan Howard and this offensive line for the Eagles, they're coming to run the ball downhill against this Bears defense, because that's exactly what they did against the Buffalo Bills. They torched that defense and run all over them on a consistent basis. In fact, let me go ahead and find this. The Buffalo Bills, thus far this season, in terms of giving up points to opposing running backs, they're the 11th worst as of right now. But this last week, Miles Sanders, 3 carries for 74 yards, 23 carries coming in the direction of Jordan Howard, which is great. We want to see high usage, 96 yards and a touchdown, eating out some work in the passing game, had 17.6 points. Going forward into this week, pretty good matchup in my opinion. Should be good. He's my number 15 back. Moving on to number 16, Mark Ingram. Solid RB2. Should be fine. The usage and the production that Nick Chubb was able to do last week kind of gives me a little bit more confidence, because maybe in fact this New England Patriots defense, they're not what they're all the hype. They're not just the best fantasy defense and one of the best fantasy prospects in the industry right now because of how much they produce due to their schedule. Maybe they are a little bit fugazi. Maybe there's a potential that if a really good rushing offense shows up and doesn't fumble, there's a chance that they could really crack open and show a little bit of weakness from that defense. So I think Mark Ingram this week has a potential of doing that. This is one of the better running offenses, if not the best running offense in the National Football League right now. And going forward, should be good to go. I like Mark Ingram at 16. Moving on to 17. That is correct. I have Jamaal Williams at number 17 because despite how much usage and how much production we see from Aaron Jones on a weekly basis, Jamaal Williams is not too far behind. He is always getting his, usage into the backfield. As I've said before, it is a 60-40 split. 60% of the snaps going towards Aaron Jones, 40% of the snaps going towards Jamaal Williams. Now, that might not be great for Jamaal Williams, but in the last couple weeks, the dude is not only finding the end zone, running on the goal line, being used in formations in which they use multiple back sets. That's perfectly fine. That's exactly what we want to see. But going forward, I think as a guy playing against the Chargers defense that cannot stop a soul, if this game gets out of hand, which I potentially think it really could, Jamaal Williams is going to be used a lot, and he should have a good game. He's my number 17. Moving on to 18, Matt Breida. The only reason Breida isn't a little bit higher is probably because if this game, similar to last week, ends up being a blowout and Breida can't find the end zone or make a big run, they're going to be quickly switching to Raheem Mostert just like they did last week. That's a concern. Also, Matt Breida isn't the RB1 of this team. He is the RB2. He's a guy that is going to get touches after the fact. Tevin Coleman just this past week had 48% of the snaps, and that was only because it was a blowout, and they had to give Raheem Mostert 21% of the snaps. But the week prior, Tevin Coleman, 66% of the snaps, Matt Breida only 27%. Matt Breida is not going to be used heavily in this offense. He's going to come in sprinkling a couple big runs here and there, and I think that hurts his value. Despite all of that, he is in a great matchup, and I expect him to be used and to have a pretty good week, hopefully finding the end zone. That's why I have him at number 18. Moving on. Number 19, Sony Michel. Should be fine. The only problem with Sony Michel, if he doesn't score a touchdown, not good. So, this past week, even though, did he even score a touchdown this past week? I'm actually quite curious. Let's see what Sony Michel was able to do. Sony Michel this past week. Game log. What did you do this last week, bud? 21 carries, 74 yards, no touchdown. Yep, that's not good. Even though it's great usage, great yards, I'm perfectly fine with that. He doesn't score a touchdown. Doesn't help anybody. So this coming week against Baltimore, a defense that has been better in the last couple of weeks, especially against the Seahawks. They played really well. they did struggle on the ground game either way. I mean, in the past, especially earlier in the season, they did struggle against the run, and I think there's a potential that in which Sony Michel could get himself, 18 plus carries, break over 75 yards, and then fall into the end zone. But that's all a matter of game script and whether or not they can get out of the goal line and handle the ball. As of right now, he sits at an RB2 kind of range every single week. If he scores a touchdown, he's an RB2. If he doesn't, he ends up being like an RB3. That's pretty much what it is. All right, moving on, number 20, Austin Ekeler. If he is used in the passing game, perfectly fine. Sure, you can score a touchdown and be great in that way, but if you're not getting enough touches through the air, that's not going to be great. Obviously, Melvin Gordon had a rushing touchdown off of a broken play because no one wanted to tackle. Even that being said, he only had 30 rushing yards and a touchdown, which saved his week. Austin Ekeler and Melvin Gordon, both are tricky plays going forward, but because I expect the Green Bay Packers to be up a lot, I expect Austin Ekeler to be in the game far more often because they're going to have to pass the ball to come back in this game, and Ekeler should be used heavily, and therefore in a PPR should be good. He's my number 20. Moving on to number 21, Frank Gore. All right. So here's the thing about Frank Gore. He continues to see the most, rushing attempts for this offense, even though there is a good amount of work going in the passing game towards Singletary. Frank Gore is going to continue to see the work on the ground against the Washington Redskins. Should be used pretty heavily. 15 carries, not going to be surprised if that is the case. And I think he should have a good game. He's still, bumbling and stumbling forward and, breaking records on a weekly basis. I think he broke a record for scrimmage yards. I think all-time scrimmage yards, something like that, which was ridiculous. I think he surpassed, 19,000? Something like that. What a crazy number. The legend continues, and he continues at my number 221 spot. Goodness gracious. Going forward in this week. All right, moving on. Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde's been pretty good. Similar to Sony Michel. If, in fact, Carlos Hyde does not fall in the end zone, he's an RB3. If he does fall in the end zone, he's an RB2. I'm hoping for a touchdown this week from him. If, in fact, he cannot get that, he's going to be a lower-end guy. But he's getting a good enough amount of touches, 20 touches, 75, 80 rushing yards. That's great. 8 points, perfect. He doesn't get any usage in the passing game. If he gets that touchdown, 14 points. That's exactly what we want to see. That's why I have him at 22. Moving on to 23, Adrian Peterson. I do not expect Darius guys to play this week. The reports are saying that he probably won't play this week. Therefore, Adrian Peterson playing against the Buffalo Bills defense that has not been good, got completely ran over for 4 straight quarters last week. I think this team, with Trent Williams potentially coming back and playing this week, increases the value of this offensive line and increases the value of Adrian Peterson in this said week. Therefore, he's my number 23. Moving on to number 24, Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman, in the duo between Lindsay and Freeman, has had the upper hand in the last couple of weeks because he is getting the goal line touches and scoring touchdowns. Outside of that value, outside of an extra 6 points, it's really been an even backfield. Even though they are both getting some work in the passing game, I think Royce Freeman, as of right now, considering how much usage he gets in the red zone as of late, is probably going to continue to go in his direction. I like him as my number 24 spot, even with the quarterback change. Moving on. Number 25, James White. Here's the thing. My RB3s right here, these are guys that I expect to have 10 or less points, typically. But I like the upside of 10 points. That's what I'm anticipating to see from a lot of these guys. 10 points is the baseline. That's why I have James White at 25, because I expect James White to always have 10 points and everyone underneath him to have a little bit less or maybe similar. Like David Montgomery, if he scores 10 points, I'm not surprised. I actually kind of expect it to happen. Potentially he scores a touchdown and it has like 40 rushing yards or 40 total yards. Not too big of a deal. But either way, James White, 25, continues to see a lot of usage through the air, nothing on the ground. If Rex Burkhead comes back, there could be a little bit of a deal in which James White kind of loses value, but I don't think it's going to happen. James White is just far too valuable as a receiving option out wide, out of the backfield, wherever they use him. Continues to find himself as one of Brady's favorite targets, and this week he's going to have to be used at a pretty good extent. Therefore, he continues to have some good RB3 value as my number 25. Moving on to 26, David Montgomery. David Montgomery's coming off of his highest workload and his best production of the entire season, having his biggest breakout game thus far. Is Matt Nagy going to continue to run the ball? Against the Philadelphia Eagles, it is a trickier task at hand, but there is always a possibility they can go ahead and succeed. We have seen other teams do so. I don't believe the talent of this Bears offensive line will be able to win up front, but there is a potential that David Montgomery has himself a good game. Like I was mentioning, scores the touchdown on the goal line, gets himself 45-ish yards, 10-plus points. Not really something that I don't expect. I actually do expect that to happen. Therefore, he sits at 26. 27, Phillip Lindsay. My issue with Phillip Lindsay is that he does not get, for the life of him, does not get enough touches every single week. I want Phillip Lindsay to touch the ball, God knows how many times, 20-plus times a game. That's what I want. A lot of people will say, hey, you know what, his body frame, he's a smaller guy, he's not built for it. I don't give a crap. I do believe that Phillip Lindsay is the more superior back between the two, but considering his usage as of late, just really can't put him up there in the RB2 conversation. He sits at 27 as of right now. Moving on to 28, Melvin Gordon. Speaking of a guy that I can't trust right now, yeah, you may have scored 10 points this past week, but outside of getting 6 points from that touchdown, you really weren't going to do anything else. Melvin Gordon is struggling. The offense of this team is struggling. They have regressed heavily in going forward. I have a hard time trusting this guy. I do believe that, yes, Green Bay's defense is not great against the run, but I do believe that Gordon is just not going to be able to get it done. The offensive line is just, it's not there. And this offense, often turning over the ball, have to come back in games. And it does not involve Melvin Gordon running the ball as a way to get back into said games. Moving on, Miles Sanders, coming off of one of his better games, scoring some touchdowns here and there, continues to be used at a limited amount in this offense. Yet, with the limited amount of touches, somehow still scoring a lot of points. The dude, just looking at his touches, only touched the ball 6 times this past week, but had over 100 total yards, had himself a touchdown. That's absolutely fantastic. We've obviously seen him in the past get more work on the ground. That's no longer existing. That is not something that we're going to continue to see because Jordan Howard has his backfield set on the ground. But we do get a little bit of sprinkle here and there. In the last couple of weeks, 6 touches, 9 touches, 6 touches, 14 touches, 11 touches. That's not bad. But unless this guy is making big plays, which he has the ability to do so, unless he's making those big plays consistently, we could see a goose egg coming in the potential future. I'm hoping that's not the case this week against the Bears. The Bears defense not great against running backs. I think there's a chance that Miles Sanders, pretty good option this week. Moving on, LeSean McCoy. He kind of struggled. The offense struggled in general in terms of running the ball. Damian Williams did have the touchdown. LeSean McCoy did fumble, but Patrick Mahomes will return, will help McCoy's value. I think he'll be fine at 30. I have a hard time thinking that McCoy is going to get replaced or anything of that sort. This offense is pretty set on being an RBBC, and I think he's probably the number one of that bunch, at least getting majority of the touches of the group. Moving on, number 31, Devin Singletary playing against the Redskins. Another one of these good options in terms of if you are in need of a guy off of waivers or off of the bottom of your bench, bottom of the barrel, to come in and play, considering there are so many bye weeks and running backs being affected. A guy that I do believe, besides of his usage in the passing game, could have a big run on the ground against that defense and could be good moving forward. Moving on, number 32, Ronald Jones. Of the 3 running backs that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers continuously use, Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber, Derek Gumbawale, I do believe Ronald Jones is going to have the better week of the bunch of them. I do think that, it's not an easy matchup. The Seahawks, they have a better defense, but I think if I had to put money on any 3 of them to have a better week, I think it's Ronald Jones. Derek Gumbawale only comes in when the game is out of hand and they need to pass the ball as a receiving back. He wasn't that good in the last couple of weeks. Couple of the targets he's seen, not great. He did steal a touchdown a couple of weeks back, but that's, regardless. I do think Ronald Jones is probably the best option in the group. Therefore, he sits at 32. Moving on to 33, Kenyan Drake. Kenyan Drake could have value this week as a receiving back. On the ground, don't anticipate it. As a receiving back, screen pass, something like that, could be fine. He is filling in the shoes of Chase Edmonds and David Johnson. There's a lot of inherent value in that backfield. The tough matchup does make it difficult, but as of right now, I don't mind him as my number 33. Moving on to 34, Mark Walton playing against the Jets. If, in fact, this team wanted to win games and or really wanted to strap down, run the ball consistently, and try to make a effort at winning a game, maybe potentially against a division rival, I think Mark Walton could see some value. He is the starting running back of this team. Kalen Ballage, there was a bunch of rumors that he was going to get the start yesterday. That was not the case. Mark Walton did start, had all the touches. He did fumble, dropped a couple passes. That's something that you're going to have to learn over time. He is a second-year player, did not play at all in his first year with the Cincinnati Bengals. So going forward, he should be fine as my number 34. Moving on to 35, Tarik Cohen. If, in fact, David Montgomery does not end up, being used heavily, which I don't expect him to be used heavily on the ground because of the tough matchup, they're going to have to pass the ball. David Montgomery did catch a couple passes thus far this season that has made it, a little bit easier for us to think that he can be a receiving back, but they love to use Tarik Cohen around the formation to make it easier on Mitchell Trubisky, get the ball out of his hands as quick as possible. Tarik Cohen could be a good option, my number 35. Moving on to my last option of the week, Jaylen Samuels. I thought he was going to have a good week last week. Didn't end up playing because he was questionable. Benny Snell came in, didn't do anything either because he left with a knee injury. As of right now, there is nobody else. If James Conner's shoulder injury does limit him, Benny Snell had a knee injury, James Conner has an AC joint sprain, Jaylen Samuels, if in fact, because rankings are always subject to change, he could come in, have a big week here against Indianapolis as the RB1 and the guy that's touching the ball the entire time. There's always a possibility of that. Anyway, those are my top 36 rankings for this week. I want to thank everybody for watching. Again, rankings are subject to change. It will change over time. If you guys haven't yet already, check out my Patreon link down in the description. For those of you looking to get all of your 2019 fantasy football questions answered, rankings, flex, updated, etc. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. I do appreciate you guys spending your time today with this spooky little design we have here with the bats and the Dragulas and suck your blood. It doesn't matter. Thank you, everybody, again. Later today, we'll be doing a mid-season award ceremony, kind of thing. You'll see it in a little bit. It will be released. So again, thank you again for watching, and until next time, which will be tomorrow or later today's video. Tomorrow, Wide Receiver Wednesdays. Later today, mid-season awards. I'll see you guys. Peace.